You know, it's funny. I remember when I did a video on Victor Wembanyama some months ago, and I came across the understanding of his association with the Buddhist monks and, the practice and whatnot. And just from that, I knew that there was something to come for him. I just wanted to put the video on hold because I wanted to gather more information. I think I titled it Victor Wembanyama on the Rise or something like that. Like, I knew that something was going to come for this guy, especially when I found out about his association with the Buddhist monks. And then, you know, I did a video on how he's like connected with the Freedom Tower. And these are things that's underlying, but you understand it more just when it comes to pieces being put together. So this was before, he advanced and went to the NBA Finals to face the New York Knicks, right? The New York Knicks, New York City, Twin Towers. He represents the Freedom Tower. We're going to get more into that. And I created this thumbnail right here. This thumbnail that you see right here was created by me because this is supposed to encapsulate the content of the video and what we're going to get into. We have 1999 and 2026. We have similarities on many different levels, and we're just going to get into it. So just hope you guys bear with me, just so you can understand where I'm coming from in regards to just context and being able to, put everything together. Because when it comes to this understanding, you have to contextualize. So that's what we're going to get into. Now, we live in a time where a lot of these things that people have suspicions about are more glaring. Just when it comes to the NBA Finals, when it comes to these things that's at the forefront, upper levels, you see a lot of posts on social media about, the predictive elements, or this was scripted, or this matches this, or this is the reason why this is. And a lot of people are asking about, 2026 and 1999 when it comes to the finals. Like, why are there so many connections? The reason why that is because 2026 and 1999, the commonality is the year of the fire horse. In 2026, this is the year of the fire horse, just like it was in 1999. That's why the finals is replicated for 1999. It represents the fire horse, as well as Molech. 99 and 66, which is 26, are interchangeable. 9 and 6 are interchangeable numerically, just when it comes to the veneration of the numbers. In regards to the system of the upper levels where they venerate numbers, they look at 6 or 6 and 9 as the same numbers. So 6 and 6 and 9 and 9 are the same. And 6 and 6 represents Molech. The number 66 represents Molech. That's why, what's going on in 26 is replicating what went on in 99, just in regards to the finals and a rematch and whatnot. It represents the year of the fire horse. And the fire horse just goes back to Horus. It goes back to the sun god. That's what it represents. Just when it comes to the Chinese understanding, going into the dragon as well. And that's why you have the aspect of Victor Wembanyama, with the Buddhists and his practices associated with that. And, the whole Chinese element, the alchemical element with the wood going into water, so on and so forth. It's all based in, the Chinese fire horse, and a commonality between 1999 and 26, where both years represented the fire horse. Nigga, they still on my flow, talking my heart, I'm still in your home, taking your heart to the pad, she getting lit, she trying to suck on the D. You see, Jalen Brunson is someone who's, often quiet, stoic, has a little quiet demeanor, just about his business. That's how Jalen Brunson comes off. So when it comes to a Jalen Brunson utilizing his hand sign, this represents the keeper of the secrets, the god of silence. Covering your mouth represents Harpocrates, the god of silence, aka Horus, the boy god. That's what it represents. He's covering his mouth because it's in veneration of Harpocrates. When you see celebrities pose like this, a lot of celebrities pose like this. They don't necessarily, throw up the two fingers right here, but they pose like this, whether they using their index finger or just throwing up some sort of hand sign where they covering their mouth. Specifically in that area, it represents the keeping of the secrets. They know what you don't know. And it's very fitting, especially when you understand the nefarious aspects of what goes on in the NBA Finals. It's not authentic. None of this shit is authentic when it comes to these basketball games. It's just not. when you was a kid and you watched these things, it was more authentic. You believed it more. When you know what you know and you see what you see, and it's more glaring, especially when it comes to the MK Ultra aspect of it, and not even just that, but just the nefarious aspects with the refs and how they just utilize these shenanigans and things that you see that lead up to the finals. When it comes to the predictive element of it, like, damn, this was supposed to happen, it lets you know. And then you see these things that you factor all in, it helps you understand what's really before you. You feel me? Think about it. Like, think about all the other elements to this, with Cat wearing the shirt, with Wemby, and how it mimics Tim Duncan, so on and so forth. And then you have this. These people know what's up. They are the subjects. They know. Even certain teams that lose to the teams that's meant to advance, they know. It's like, damn, we had to just be the subjects of it or the victims of it. All these things that you see when it comes to the patterns and how it leads to a certain conclusion of suspicion, as far as like it being rigged or it being more than meets the eye. You got to factor these things in when it comes to something like this that you see. Now, this right here is just him celebrating, but what does it mean on a deeper level? The keeper of the secrets. Jalen Brunson is an esotericist. He wears number 11. Number 11 represents mind activation. He's most likely someone who's put under programming. And think about the dad angle. His dad wore number 9. He wears number 11. New York City. The reason why that's important is because, remember, Rick Brunson was in the 1999 finals against the Spurs. And we already understand what happened 2 years later with the Twin Towers and how that matches the New York Knicks going against the Spurs, who had the Twin Towers of David Robinson and Tim Duncan. Underlying conveyances, underlying connections. So Rick and Jalen, 9/11, that's what that represents. New York City. There would be a great thing that would happen in New York City since the destruction of the towers, and that would be Jalen Brunson bringing the New York Knicks to the NBA Finals. On a surface level, that's what it represents in terms of, the predictive element of Spurs versus Knicks and mimicking 1999. And also factoring in the aspect of the Twin Towers and the destroy and rebuild understanding, just when it comes to Victor Wembanyama, being that new and improved quote unquote tower, right? 11. Now, brothers, I'm sure you guys already know based off of my posts about it, but when it comes to the underlying conveyance and esoteric significance, and also just these eerie elements, these predictive elements, you have Tim Duncan and David Robinson in 1999 in the aftermath of them winning Game 5 against the New York Knicks to win the NBA championship, their first NBA championship for the San Antonio Spurs. The Twin Towers, that's what their nickname was. And it's very, very significant that the Twin Towers will win their first NBA championship against the New York Knicks, the hub of the world. This is why you had this aspect of certain people with their premonitions about what was to come the very next year because of Y2K. People being scared that it was going to be the end of the world. But it was something very, very similar that would happen a year later in 2001, which was the destruction of the towers. And in 1999, or even before that, like 1997, there was predictive elements to it, especially with The Simpsons, but other elements that would tell you about what would occur in 2001. You saw that in 1999, 1998, 97, even before that. So when it finally happened, you go back and you think about certain underlying conveyances. The underlying conveyance is something that connects to it that you wouldn't necessarily put together with it. Like this is what connects to it, is just on an esoteric front. Because of alchemy, because of the understanding of destroy and rebuild, these Masonic concepts and philosophies that apply. Because the NBA is on the upper levels, $1 billion corporation, right? So it's important for us to understand when it comes to that type of status, it has to push esotericism. It has to push these occultic philosophies. It just does, just on a certain level. So, right, you have the Twin Tower element, You have the fact that in 2001 you had this destruction of the towers, and it was more than meets the eye when it comes to that. The official story is bullshit, but that's another video. I already did a video on it. You had the destruction of it, and then years later, you had the rebuild, and you had a higher tower that was built 1,776 feet high, 1776, representing the first Masonic Lodge, as well as, Declaration of Independence and all that. But really going into the first Masonic Lodge, that's what that represented, right? And then, 2011, you have the person that's the culprit being caught, which was ritualistic, because 11 is the number that's key. Like, they saved these dates for reasons. If they really wanted to catch Bin Laden, they would have caught him before 2011. They waited to do 2011 because of the numbers and what it represents. Even when it comes to that demolition expert who died because he understood the truth about what happened with the Twin Towers. He died in 2011, and he died nefariously. They killed him, right? He was a Russian man. I forget his name. But you see the Twin Towers, a.k.a. Tim Duncan and David Robinson, the last great two big men of the Spurs. I mean, they had LaMarcus Aldridge, but at the same time, these were the ones, very fitting, the ones, Twin Towers. So that goes, just when it comes to David Robinson, he retires, I believe, in 2003, and which was their second championship, 2003. And then Tim Duncan retires, I believe, 13 years later, 2016. And then that Freedom Tower comes 10 years later, which is Victor Wembanyama, a chosen one, wearing number 1 for a reason. Number 1 represents him as a chosen one, as well as the One Freedom Tower. One World Trade Center. Number 1 represent the chosen one. I believe, before that he was wearing number 32. I don't know if number 32 was retired on the Spurs, but number 1 was very fitting. And we already understand, if you follow the NBA, you know that the Spurs, they was gifted Victor Wembanyama. They was gifted him. Believe it or not, they was gifted Victor Wembanyama. It's not as glaring as Dallas when it comes to Cooper Flag, but that was nefarious as well when it comes to Victor Wembanyama being drafted by the Spurs. He was gifted on that team. He was supposed to be on that team. Greg Popovich is a big time handler. These people, they understand the programming aspect very, very well. Steve Kerr, Greg Popovich, the legendary coach for the Bulls and the Lakers, Phil Jackson. These guys understand the programming levels. They into these different occultic philosophies. Like Phil Jackson, he was into, the Buddha. He was into all these different philosophies that was based in the esoteric and, the Zen philosophy and keeping your mind in a certain state where the game slows down for you. That's what Kobe adhered to. Kobe was a part of that. Victor Wembanyama, he's going through that. He's going through, his progress and process in that. He's going to be unstoppable, not only because of him being a super soldier, which I believe, but also because of the Buddhist aspect, where it's like, the mental is going to take over. It's going to make him stronger, because you have these philosophies that's associated with Buddhism, like the yin and the yang and the Zen aspects, so on and so forth. And then, the alchemical with the balance of fire and ice, or hot and cold, these different aspects, they apply to certain people who are assets in the entertainment industry, believe it or not, such as Victor Wembanyama. And you look at him, he's extremely tall. He's very, very tall, 7'5", 7'6". It's just the things that he does when it comes to his movements is something that you don't see from a person that's 7'5". So it makes you wonder, like, what is this guy really? And then again, I could be wrong, but all this stuff, I just, it's too glaring, Even KD, like KD is what, 6'11", 7 foot, and he moves like that. But Vic is just, Vic is like, he got what, 6 more inches on KD, and he's moving just as fluid as KD. He's moving like a guard. He goes to the NBA Finals in his third year. First ever playoff run, he goes to the finals. You know what that's known as? That's known as accelerated development, because he's a super soldier. He's a chosen one. Accelerated development. You have accelerated development, and you have arrested development. Arrested development is basically someone who's put under the program, and they're prognosticated to excel and be great, but they don't pan out to be at. It's kind of similar to like George Hill, who played for the Bucks. He played for the Pacers, played for the Spurs. He was put on the programming, but he didn't pan out to be what they wanted him to be. That was arrested development. Victor Wembanyama, accelerated development. LeBron James, accelerated development, right? So I wanted to further accentuate the connection with the Towers and the Knicks, as well as the Spurs, especially on an esoteric front when it comes to the underlying connection. Because in 1970, that was the completion of the first tower, the North Tower. 1970, it was topped out. It had residents moving in 1970. 1970 was the same year, the first year that the New York Knicks won their championship. 1970. Officially in the NBA, in 1970, they won their first championship. The New York Knicks, which was the first year that the Tower 1 was completed. And in 1973, which was the next year that they won their championship, that's when Tower 2 was completed. Right? So the underlying conveyance is right there. That's why you had in 1999 the Twin Towers going against the New York Knicks and David Robinson and Tim Duncan, and they beat them. And then 2 years later, 1-1, you have the Twin Towers in destruction. And then in the aftermath, years later, you have the Freedom Tower that's built, which is 1776 feet long. And then the underlying conveyance or connection to that is Victor Wembanyama, who's taller than the original Twin Towers of David Robinson and Tim Duncan. And he's 7'6", 1776, 7'6". So that's me just accentuating the connection with the Twin Towers, the New York Knicks, San Antonio Spurs, and the underlying esoteric conveyance or connection. Listen, man, you know in the NBA, they try to go off of listed height, listed weight, like Kevin Durant and certain other NBA players. LeBron James, he's 6'8", 6'9". Victor Wembanyama is 6'7". I mean, he's 7'6". You know, some say 7'5", 7'4". You know, that's probably with his shoes off. With his shoes on, he's 7'6", and that's what we look at just when it comes to how we base height when it comes to NBA players. We base it off of them wearing their shoes, because basketball players don't play with their shoes off. So he's 7'6". And the reason why that's significant is because, once again, it further connects with the understanding of his first NBA title run going against the New York Knicks, and, you know, the Freedom Tower, how that connects with the Twin Towers, and, you know, everything I laid out. So this is why I wanted to further accentuate his height. He is 7'6". Solve a coagula. Coagula means rebuild, come together. It's like when you bleed. Blood spills on the floor, it coagulates. It comes together. It's hard to get it up. Destroy and rebuild. Solve a coagula. When you go from base metal to fine gold. The alchemical aspect. And then the Masonic aspect. Destroy the temple to rebuild the new. You know? These things are based in alchemy. That's what it's all based in. Understanding of destroy and rebuild. Order ab chaos. Order out of chaos. The chaos was the destruction of the tower. The order was the implementation of the new tower, as well as new laws that came from the destruction. It was all ritualistic. Destroy and rebuild. Solve a coagula. The One World Trade Center, often called 1 WTC or the Freedom Tower, is the main building of the rebuilt World Trade Center complex in Lower Manhattan, New York City. Standing at a symbolic 1,776 feet, it is the tallest building in the Western Hemisphere. It's 1,776 feet to the tip of the spire or spear, honoring the year of the U.S. Declaration of Independence, as well as the first Masonic Lodge. The first Masonic Lodge in Philadelphia, 1776. This is why you have the 76ers. because it represents the first Masonic lodge, as well as, you know, celebrating Benjamin Franklin, you know, who was a part of that. So that's what it represents. Just when it comes to the other level that's meaningful to these people, they're going to give you the surface and say, oh, it's based in a Declaration of Independence. But what's meaningful is the Masonic Lodge. That's what's meaningful. So that's what it represents. And it's a higher tower than the original towers, which is symbolic for Victor Wembanyama being introduced as this new fine gold to, you know, the base metal or the lead that was Tim Duncan. But not necessarily Tim Duncan, but more so the aftermath of Tim Duncan. You know, because Tim Duncan obviously brought championships to the Spurs. But he retired, and then you had this 10-year gap. That 10-year gap represents the lead turning into the gold, which is Victor Wembanyama. The lead was the retirement of Tim Duncan. Like, he left, he broke down, he was no more, you know. The big fundamental formed the legendary Twin Towers duo for the San Antonio Spurs, playing together from 1997 until Robinson's retirement in 2003. This unselfish Hall of Fame front court won 2 NBA championships and is celebrated as one of the most dominant defensive pairings in NBA basketball history, the Twin Towers era. When the Spurs drafted Tim Duncan first overall in 1997, Robinson, already an MVP and face of the franchise, selflessly embraced the young phenom because he knew what Tim Duncan was. He knew what Tim Duncan was going to be based off of the programming. Together, they created a cultural foundation of teamwork that defined the Spurs franchise for decades. Exactly, you know, it elongated. It was something that was maintained, stood the test of time for that 10-year gap. And then you have Victor Wembanyama, who comes and, you know, he's the savior for the franchise. He's going to be the face of the league. He's going to be, you know, a great, iconic player. You can just tell his trajectory is probably the highest of any NBA player that ever been drafted. Just based over how he looks and his skills and just, like I said, the accelerated development. Doesn't he have like the highest trajectory out of out of any NBA player ever? Think about it. Even higher than LeBron. Like, his trajectory is so high, it's so crazy. Like, his upside is just crazily high. See, this is why it's important for us to understand what's before us in regards to what we're reading, what we search up, and what we understand. Because when it comes to Google and the official lookups or search, it's always going to give you, you know, the cookie cutter bullshit. It's going to say, oh, Victor Wembanyama is not a Buddhist, but he went to the monastery and practiced everything that's associated with Buddhism. It's like, come on, man. He wore the robe to the game. He's associated with Buddhism. That's what it is. They always try to make it seem as if these connections aren't there when they're there. As if, you know, they know what's real about these things. Right? For you to try to dispel Victor Wembanyama as a Buddhist and say, you know, he's not a Buddhist and this and that, it only means that you know that there's other elements of Buddhism or anything. Just when it comes to Google and how they try to dispel it, you know that there's things in it that's nefarious, that's off, you know. Victor Wembanyama is not a practicing Buddhist. You see, that right there just lets you know that they know that Buddhism is more to it than just the surface. This is why they try to dispel it in regards to Victor Wembanyama's association with it. Though he has engaged with Buddhist culture, he sparked brief speculation after practicing or participating in a 10-day spiritual retreat at China's legendary Shaolin Monastery, the birthplace of Zen Buddhism. During his stay, he embraced the monastic lifestyle, shaving his head, wearing the traditional robes, and following a strict vegetarian diet in accordance with Buddhist principles. However, Victor Wembanyama is not ordained as a monk or made the trip strictly for personal discipline, inner reflection, and physical training. Yes, because it's supposed to further push the programming for him. He's 22 years old. You think he thought of this himself? And maybe he did, but you can tell that it's based off of further pushing the programming because of what we know about the Buddhist practices. Kobe Bryant and Phil Jackson, they practiced Buddhism. They were esotericists. They were Luciferians. Especially Kobe. Kobe was glaring with it. He told you to embrace the dark path, the dark energy. Even promoting it to kids. This guy was a part of the Buddhist understanding, the Buddhist philosophy, Buddhist principle. He was a part of Buddhist culture. He even playfully joked about his new religion after the retreat, saying, "I'm pretty sure I'm Buddhist now," before later admitting he had to sneak out to eat meat to maintain his playing weight, NBA playing weight. And we also understand the Buddhist practice and how you have the I Ching being, a part of the Buddhist philosophy and practice, just when it comes to the alchemical front. In Chinese philosophy, the I Ching, the Book of Changes, is fundamentally paired with the 5 elements or Wu Zing. Rather than physical matter, these are 5 dynamic phases of energy. Wood, which is growth, expansion, and upward movement. Fire, transformation, passion, and illumination. Earth, stability, nourishment, and centeredness. Metal, refinement. Refinement. Structure and precision. Water, flow, stillness, and deep wisdom. And all these things are interconnected, because you use wood to make fire. Fire bears the earth. Earth breathes metal. And metal collects water. Water nourishes the earth. So all these things are interchangeable. And just when it comes, no, not interchangeable, more so interconnected. And just when it comes to the understanding, it's alchemical. You go from lead to gold, right? Or wood to water, black to white, yin to yang.